California. A competitive and savvy youth, he graduated from high school at 16 and dove into undergraduate studies at Brigham Young University, nearly completing a bachelor's degree in political science before serving his full-time mission for the LDS Church in Peru. Brian's plans for law school after his mission took backseat to his natural entrepreneurial spirit. In 2001, he launched what would become the most integrated manufacturer of identification products in America. In 8 short years, Namifiers LLC obtained national rapport for efficiency and accessibility to consumers. In 2008, New York's own Inc. magazine selected Namifiers as the number 12 fastest growing private manufacturer in the United States and number 1 in Utah. Locally, Bryan has been honored as an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year finalist and as the 2007 Reed Smoot Businessman of the Year. Of the great things he has and will still accomplish, his greatest successes lay with his wife and 6 children and being able to faithfully serve in church assignments. So with that, we'll turn it over to Bryan.
Well, this is going to be fun. I get to do this again. Was anyone here for the last one? Good. Good, so I can change it up a little bit. Well, I guess my goal here is to talk to you and hopefully inspire you to do something that you're not already doing, whatever that is. I think that's the goal of any class or any organization where we're teaching principles. It's to leave with some sort of desire to do something a little bit different than what you're currently doing. For some of you, it may be a course correction. For some of you, you may just be in here for the credit. Most of you may be in here for the credit. But I'm hoping that there are 1 or 2 of you in here that will take something, and maybe it'll help you jumpstart to take that step into whatever it is you want to do to fulfill those dreams that you may have. I'm going to begin with a story that I'd like to bring up. One of the things that I like to do is obviously share the gospel. Hopefully that's most of us have that same desire to be able to go out to the world and share the gospel with those individuals that may stand in need of receiving that. Well, one of the things that my wife and I enjoy doing is as we go on trips or vacations or different areas, and as I travel around, we get a chance to pass out these pass-along cards and get to talk to people on airplanes or different things. And one of the questions that I ask people is I will say something to the effect of, well, do you know anything about the LDS Church? Seems like a pretty common question. Some people do, some don't. Then when I let them know that we're LDS, then here's the question that I like to ask. What is the question that you've always wanted to ask a Mormon, but you've always been too scared to ask, or you've always been too concerned to ask, or what's just something that you would like to ask them? And usually that gets a rise out of people because I tell them, it's okay, ask me anything. Anything at all. Don't be scared. So they get their defenses down. And anyway, I won't go into all the details of all the experiences that I've had with it. But my most recent one I thought was interesting. And as BYU is filled up with many people from Utah and California, a guy leaned forward. We were actually on a cruise last month in Mexico, and we were eating dinner with this other couple from San Diego. And he said to me, he said, all right. He's like, I'll ask you. He said, tell me the differences between the California Mormons and the Utah Mormons, because there's definitely a difference. They obviously come from 2 different branches and they follow 2 different types of religion or whatever it was. Anyway, we got a laugh out of it because I grew up in California and I've actually lived here now the same time in Utah that I have or that I did in California. So I'm kind of split half and half. He was from San Diego, knew a lot of LDS people. Well, the reason why I share that is because my hope today is that you will just shoot up your hand and ask any question that you've always wanted to ask. I don't consider myself an entrepreneur, but any entrepreneur or somebody that maybe has done something outside of the norm, somebody that has actually broken some of those normalcies that we find where You go to school, you get a degree, you go back, you get your graduate degree, you go and settle down with the company for 5 years. You don't like that because it's in Wisconsin or Montana or Texas, and you decide, my wife doesn't like it here, so we're going to move, and then you go back and do some more grad, et cetera, et cetera. Well, most of us follow that path, and I did a little bit too, but somewhere along the way, I decided to take a different approach to business. In 1999, I was married, just got married. As you mentioned, I served a mission in Peru, down in South America. Loved the Peruvian people. I thought, what could I do for them? That dream sort of died away as I got back into the hustle and bustle of school. Then I got married, and some of my other dreams started going away. It's not a reflection against my wife at all. But when you get married, you just have an increased responsibility, an obligation to provide. Well, obviously, we go to what we think of where we say, well, in order to provide, I need to go to school, I need to get an education, I need to finish the things that I'm supposed to, because that's what I'm taught to do. Well, in 1999, my wife had a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit. She was very supportive, and I decided to start a care packaging business. Seemed simple. I was working at the MTC at the time, and there really wasn't a care package service that went to the MTC. In other words, all of these parents would leave the MTC, and they had to mail their packages, and it would take 2, 3, 4, 5 days to get their packages. So I thought, well, maybe we ought to just set up a phone line. This is easy enough. I'll go to Sam's Club, I'll buy a bunch of candy, and sell it for twice as much, and people can just call me, and I'll take their packages up to the MTC. Well, it was a brilliant business model, right? Because that was the extent of it. That's about as much thought as I had put into it. So I decided to start the business, went down, registered the business, learned all about registering a business, getting some tax stuff, et cetera, et cetera. That was fun. It was entertaining. Well, after a couple of weeks, my first experience was going up to BYU, or up here to the MTC, and I started passing out the pamphlets that people could order. They could order these care packages. They included candy and food and all sorts. Well, my first experience was, for the first time, I saw what parents look like when they drop off their missionary on a Wednesday afternoon. I had no idea that my parents looked like that, but everybody was just sobbing and desolate and depressed and sad, and I thought, this is awful. Like, who wants to stand here on the sidewalk? Well, I did that for a couple of Wednesdays, all depressed, and then finally security came out, I think it was my third Wednesday, and said, are you passing out anti-Mormon literature? And I said, no, in fact, I teach here at the MTC. And he said, wait a minute, you teach here, it violates your contract. I said, no, hold on a minute, I'm not, anyway, I kind of backed up a little bit. Off of those 2 or 3 weeks of just passing out pamphlets, going out and working, we picked up a few different clients and ended up paying off all of the candy that we had purchased anyway. But then decided that I still had to finish my degree in political science. I didn't really have time to be an entrepreneur at that time, and so we sold the business for a couple $1,000s to a family in our ward. The cool thing was we had a lot of candy for the next 6 months or 8 months. But one thing it did for me is, as I sat there, probably similar to you, it was my senior year at BYU, I would do the crossword puzzle, the Daily Universe, every day in political science. Is anyone in here studying political science? It's kind of. Okay, no comment. All right, so I finished up my political science degree, and I would sit there in the mornings and in my final classes, and the whole time I was thinking, there's got to be something else I can do. There's got to be something different out there. Took my LSAT, got ready for law school, was accepted to law school back in California, back home, and then something happened. I graduated in 2000. Something happened in the fall of 2000, about August, first week of August, I guess, where I just kind of felt sick about this whole idea of going off to law school, spending the next 3 years of my life going to school. It was interesting because the way it was going to be set up, I was going to be gone 4 or 5 nights a week. And then I thought about becoming an attorney, and that just, there was a cool side of it because it said, well, I'm an attorney, instant respect, right? Well, for some. But the other side of it, I just thought, I have to do 60, 70 billable hours per week. Well, I began to think, maybe this isn't the right path for me. So I created a plan. My plan at that time was to not go to law school. Well, that didn't fly very well with my parents' wife and her parents and everything else. So I had to come up with another plan. Well, at that time, I had talked to my father-in-law, who actually was involved in the engraving business. And he said, well, why don't you go and talk to this guy? He's got the domain nametags.com. And Bryan, you like to dabble around in internet work, and you like to play with the search engines, and maybe you could help him out a little bit. So that's my first project, if you will, that I started to dive into. Well, I decided at that point, my wife and I were very prayerful about it, and interestingly enough, it was a very powerful experience for me to, and I know I needed something like this to be able to confront the world that says, why would you drop out of law school? I mean, we were 3 weeks out, housing deposits had been made, tuition deposits had been made, everything was all set up. Why would you give that up to be able to do something different? So I took it before the Lord. Felt a certain impression that I should, take a year off. Felt that I had been given that green light to go ahead and follow this plan. Well, again, that was in the year 2000. So I partnered up with this guy that owned nametags.com. He and I worked together for about 2 years, and it was really very simple. All I did was create a website. At least so I thought at the time. So my first step was to create the website, and then we had a deal going that I would take a certain percentage of profits that would come off of the website. Well, it got to the point where we launched, got it top of the search engines, and he couldn't handle the growth that was happening, so I got more involved in starting to develop some processes so that we could start selling more products and more name tags, badges, nameplates, simple engraving, signs, things like that. By the time 2002 came around, actually let me back up. In 2001, 9/11 hit. The economy started to go south. Similar to, I think it's going south now. Maybe some of you have heard. There's a good rally today in the stock market if you're watching. But in 2000, after 9/11, all of a sudden, the phone stopped ringing, and I thought to myself, okay, we're in trouble. Now this year off that I decided to take isn't going to work out. Well, we decided to switch our focus a little bit. We were in the name tag business, so we thought, what can we do in the name tag business to make it work? Now, this may seem obvious to all of you, but it didn't seem obvious to me that we would get into ID products, that we would actually get into ID cards. All of a sudden, people wanted security. People wanted lanyards and neck cords. People wanted badge holders. People wanted proximity cards. They wanted card swipe, key access systems. So that's what we did. We just sort of shifted our business a little bit, and we became the name tag people, but now we were the name badge people. In 2002, we acquired a company from Florida that owned the domain keyrings.com. We got involved with keyrings and just used that as another domain. And then by that time, I was still thinking about going back to school. In 2002, I decided to go back and get my MBA. And my reason for getting the MBA wasn't necessarily for the degree itself anymore. It was now because people would ask me what a P&L was. And I would just kind of look at them and say, I don't know what that means, profit and loss. And I thought that's a simple thing. People would talk about ROI, and I thought, what does that mean? Return on investment. So I decided to get my MBA. And in that process, somewhere between 2002 and 2004, we had started to develop a certain number of systems. We started to put a number of systems in place that would allow us to be not just a regular name tag and name badge making facility, but it allowed us to do it a lot faster. And we sort of developed this niche where instead of the jobs taking 5 days or 7 days like it did for most people, suddenly we could do things in a day. Well, I bought out my partner in 2002, and one of the reasons why is because he and I were just different. I was willing to work 12 hours a day. At the time, he was married, 4 kids, Elders Quorum president, I think. He was busy. He wanted to work 10 to 5, which makes sense. He had a snowmobiling habit that he liked to enjoy, and it just got to a point where we just kind of had a different vision. So it worked out. I was able to be involved in buying him out and being able to take control of nametags.com at that point. We also launched additional 10 or 12 different websites, which is pretty common. We just use those for channels. We still have those today that would feed into our business. As I share these experiences with you, I can't help but think I don't really talk about the business very often. A lot of people ask me what I do, and I just have resorted to the fact that I'm not a doctor, I'm not an attorney, I'm an engraver, or I'm a printer, and that's what I do. But we sell millions and millions of items, and it works out well for us, and it provides a living for many people. So a little bit about that's a little bit about the startup of the company, how we started. I mean, the details, I can give you the stories, anything that we want to talk about, but basically it's this. When we started up, most people, you hear the stories about suffering and starvation and borrowing and begging and stealing and doing this and everything else, and I think we had a little bit of that, but at the same time, I always tell people one of the most important things that you can do with a business is to make sure that you understand your own personal objectives of why you're having the business, and that those business objectives will be able to tie back in to your personal objectives. And I'll give you an example of that. Most people that want to be entrepreneurs say to themselves, I want to be an entrepreneur because either I want to save the world, and if you're those type of people, I'm not going to talk to you right now because you've got really good hearts. For the rest of us that are on the other side that want to make a lot of money for whatever reason, maybe you want to save the world ultimately, but I ask people, why is it that you want to be an entrepreneur? And most people say, well, I want to make money, or I want to be able to do this. And that they define usually ties back in with time. Because I've realized in this life that we all have 24 hours in a day. That's something that is equal for all of us. Now, some of us may pass away tomorrow, and some of us may not. But for the most part, our human existence gives us a certain measure of time. We're only allowed a certain number of minutes in an hour, a certain number of hours in a day. So I find that most people want to be in business to have their time, whatever it comes down to. You may say, well, I'd like to make enough money so I can have my own jet. And why do you want your own jet? So I can just pick up and leave and go somewhere wherever I want. Well, why do you want to do that? Well, so I can spend time with my family, so I don't have to spend time in an airport. And some of you may say, like, well, I want to have a really fast car because it'll get me from one destination to the next faster, right? That's actually a justification. But I find that most people that do business or get involved with business do it because they want to be able to have some sense of time. They want to spend time with their children. They want to go to soccer games. They want to coach their kids' teams. They want to spend time with their spouse. They want to go on vacation. They want to go and do all these things. But really what it comes down to is they want to actually use their time to be with somebody or to help out other people. So that was my goal initially, is to get into business, and I wanted to have my freedom. Now, most people will tell you that when you start a business, you don't have any freedom. You don't. You sacrifice everything. But those of you that have served missions know what that's like. You don't really have any freedom. You get up, you work 12, 13, 14 hours a day, then you come back and go to sleep. That's it. Well, that's what it's like when you start your own business. If you were a good missionary, you probably thought about the investigators during the night. You'll think about your business during the night. You'll wake up in the morning. People ask me what my day is like quite often, and I say, well, I crawl out of bed, I roll out of bed, fall on the floor, prayers are first, and then I reach for my BlackBerry. And I get all the updates of everything that's happened overnight, everything that's happened in China, everything that's happening with our production facility, and then I can start my day. That's usually my second thing that I do. What happens is when you're involved in your own business, you think about it. It's like a child. I always liken it to, we have 6 children, and my children to my wife are like the business to me. Now don't go all weird on me. Just work with me for a little bit. I feel like there are the infant phases. There are the changing diaper phases of the business, the phases that nobody likes. Maybe some of you like that. There are those phases that nobody likes. There are the screaming phases. There are the middle of the night phases. There are the this is going to tear my marriage apart phases. Business is a lot like that when you own your own business because you are creating something. Now, many of you are in here just because this is part of a requirement for a degree. Others of you are in here because you understand that there's a divine attribute inside of you to actually create something. And you have a desire to create something and then to watch it grow. So one of the biggest benefits that you have of business is you get your freedom. You get to decide what you're going to do with your time. And you get to decide what you're going to invest in. And if you play your cards right, it actually creates some pretty good job security. Now, a couple things. I'm going to give you the answers to your questions that you're going to have at the end of the semester, or however you take the test at the end. A couple things that people ask me. They talk about what are two principles, or what are two things that would define a person as being smart. And the reason why I came up with this is because people would always say, Bryan, you're a smart guy. And they would always preface it with this. And they would say, Bryan, you're a smart guy. Tell me how you did this. And I would think to myself, I'm not that smart. Like, I really had to work hard, even at BYU. Like, I really had to sit in the classes and pay attention. I know, it's because I was doing the crossword. That's probably why I didn't do as well. But I was the type that I didn't consider myself really book smart. I would read an English paper or do Spanish literature, and I was thinking, I don't understand any of this. What are they talking about? And they would have a comprehension question at the end, and I was thinking, I don't get this. But then people would look at me and say, well, you're a smart guy. So I decided to define what I consider smart. So I'm going to use two gospel principles that I think help define a person as being smart. One of them, Elder Bednar talked about, and it's in the Book of Mormon. In the beginning, he talks about being quick to observe. I think a person that is smart is a person that's quick to observe. Now, it may sound simple enough, but quick to observe is the opposite of actually having tunnel vision. So you have people that have tunnel vision that can only see so far in front of them. These are people that have their lights on at night. They can only see so far and so far to the left and the right. A person that's quick to observe has full sunlight. They can see all around them. They can see down at the very end. They can see a lot of these different things. So that's the first principle that I recommend to people. If you're quick to observe, you're pretty smart. If you can notice certain things, like if you can notice, some people call it OCD, but if you can notice certain things that may be out of place, something that's not quite right, you're on your way to being smart. That's okay. That's a good quality to have. If something's not quite clean, if something's out of place, if it's off kilter, if the chairs aren't lined up next to each other, you're not weird. You're actually smart. You understand order things, so you're just quick to observe. The second principle that I find defines smart. And when I say smart, I don't mean intelligence, because I don't want to get into a gospel doctrinal discussion about the definition of intelligence and matter and truth and light and everything else. I'm talking about just smart, just business smarts. But the second thing is, it talks about it in the book of Alma, 57:21, talking about obeying with exactness. I tell people that you're a smart person if you obey with exactness. It may seem really simple. I'll give you an example. If I give someone a task and I ask them to do 3 or 4 things, let's say I ask them to do 4 things, and they come back and they do 2 of them, they may think in their mind that they have accomplished the task, because they said, well, I did what you asked me to do. I said, right, but I asked you to do these 2 other details. And it may not seem like a big deal to them, because they think, well, it shouldn't really matter if I do this first or this first or this first. But the Lord's established a pattern for all of us and has asked us to obey with exactness. He's asked us to make sure that we are accomplishing the tasks that He's set before us. It protected the army of Helaman. That's what the Scripture makes reference to, because they came in and they obeyed with exactness. Now, in our organization, one of the things we try and do is obey with exactness. If I have 10 tasks that I'm supposed to accomplish, or a series of 10 events that I'm supposed to do, I want to make sure I do those one step at a time. Because, I'll give you an example, I was doing some business consulting with a company in Denver, and they said, no, we did everything you told us to do. And I said, great, so we're ready to launch this startup model. We're ready to get it off the ground. So we go to get it off the ground, and they forgot one little detail, which is turn in the articles of organization to be an LLC with the state of Colorado. Now for them, they thought, oh yeah, shoot, I forgot that. That's really not a big deal. But here we are, getting ready to put time, energy, resources, and everything into this company, but it's not yet a legitimate company. Seems pretty obvious, but one small oversight, they did everything else. Logo design was worked out, all the marketing was worked out, all the deals were in place, all the clients were in place, everything's worked out, but technically we're not legally allowed to actually be a business because they failed to put this particular part in and file it with this particular department. So those are the two things that define somebody being smart, at least according to me, for whatever that's worth. Okay, a couple other things. I'm going to give you your two other questions so that you understand these, and then we'll move on. And I hope that as you're thinking about this, that you come up with some good questions. Number one, I talk about the hinges of successful business planning. This is going to be one of the questions on there. I believe that there are 4 hinges to successful business planning. There could be more, there could be less. Many of the things that I'm teaching you, they come from Chinese proverbs and scriptures and everything else because they are eternal truth, just scaled down so that we can understand it in our own personal application. But I believe, like any door, we need more than one hinge to have a successful business. The 4 hinges of successful business planning, or to make a business successful, is number 1, the owner has to have a desire. I see too many people that jump into business and say, I'm ready to do a business. Well, then they think, do I stay at work or do I come home to watch The Office? Because I have a choice. Do I stay at work or do I go home and do this? Do I stay at work or do I go home and do this? You have to have that desire to be able to focus. Now, I'm not saying you have to spend all your time at work, but there's a phase when you get into business, like any other project, where, like I said about changing dirty diapers, there are going to be those days where you decide, can I just let the baby run around with the dirty diaper for another 24 hours? Maybe it'll be okay. But I want to make sure that we understand that the desire, you have to have a certain level of desire to have the business. The second thing is the business plan or the business model. You'll get many people that will say this. Many people fall into the trap of doing too much on their business plan, but they never execute. So we're going to talk about some of these other things. Or some people will write the business model together, but they don't have the desire to do it. You know that. You've been in certain classes or you've put a business model together, but you say, I don't really want to sell leaf blowers. I'm not interested in that. I don't want to be the leaf guy the rest of my life. You may not have a desire to do that. But there has to be some sort of plan. And when I talk about plan, I mean the 1-year, 5-year, 10-year business plan of what is going to happen with the business, what direction I'm heading, where I'm taking these personal and business objectives. The third thing that I talk about, some of the hinges that we have, are the systems. Most businesses succeed because they have certain systems in place. And some of those systems show up because we actually planned for them and they were part of the plan. And some of them just show up because out of necessity, you had to create something. In other words, the fire was going. You didn't realize that grease is going to make it explode. You didn't realize that flour is going to work. You didn't realize that water is going to work. You didn't realize those things. But sometimes in business, you just get a fire, and you have to figure out the best and fastest way to put it out. And by accident, you develop some sort of system. And then that becomes the new standard of, hey, whenever there's a fire, throw water on it. And it's genius. People come up with it and say, what a great idea. Now, keep in mind that many entrepreneurs that come in will tell you they didn't have a business plan. So some of them just have a strong desire, and some have some systems and processes in place that they stumble upon. And again, I think most businesses only need 2 of these 4 hinges to be successful. The fourth one ties in with a little bit of technology, but technology being used for consistency. I believe that consistent improvement and consistency over a period of time in a business will allow you to succeed as an organization. We use technology to help our consistency. By that I mean we need to make sure we're operating at this pace and we don't fall down from that pace. We do our emailing, our texting, our reporting. Everything is done following technology to make sure that we are consistent in our processes. Because I can set up a business and I can say I have a great business and then I have this model that I have in place, but if I launch the model and I'm not consistent and I have no way of enduring to the end in the model, if you will, if I have no way of making sure that I can make it work, then I run into problems. So those are the four hinges we discuss in our organization and we feel that make a business successful. Finally, just one business thought. This is easy. I believe that any small business needs to look at a SWOT analysis. SWOT is SWOT, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's important for most businesses or any organization or any individual, we can use these same principles to look at the strengths that they have and be able to capitalize on those and say, we're strong at this as an organization. This is why. We need to be able to look at ourselves, hold a mirror up as a business and say, these are our weaknesses. In our organization, we spend a lot of time on our weaknesses. We figure out, why are we weak here? Why are we weak in this sector? Why is it that we haven't figured this out yet? What are we missing? And we try and strengthen those. It's easy to look at opportunities. We talk about them all the time, right? Boy, it sure would be great to do this, or I have an opportunity to do this. That becomes our marketing plan. And then finally, businesses need to prepare for threats. We've grown about, I don't know the exact numbers, but we've had triple-digit growth every year since I started, except for last year. Last year we grew about 80%. This year we expect to grow about 80%. And our management team was somewhat disappointed in the numbers. But I tell them, in this economy, it's good that we're still afloat and we're still doing well and still able to grow. And oftentimes people will ask, well, why is it that you guys haven't laid anybody off? Why haven't you had to do that like most of the organizations? And I think that's because we've had a plan in place with our threats. We've always known what the threats are going to be. What happens if? Those are the threats. What happens if a government regulation comes in and says nobody is allowed to wear name tags anymore, ever? What happens if, it seems like a simple concept, but we have to ask ourselves in any business, what are your threats out there? What happens if somebody takes a monopoly in the business of some sort? What if they start pushing you out a little bit? What are some of those threats? What happens, is China a threat to my business? What happens if they start selling stuff cheaper, better, quicker, faster, whatever? But we had a threat plan in place, and so last July we began to execute that threat plan to keep us afloat. A lot of our competitors went out of business and by the end of the year because they didn't have those certain threat plans in place. They just realized, well, nothing will ever happen with the economy. Nothing will ever happen with government regulations, etc. Well, it's really hard for me to talk about the business because I feel like I'm so caught up in it. I'll just kind of say in summation that I don't consider myself necessarily an entrepreneur. I consider myself somebody who saw a chance or an opportunity to improve upon something, and I took it. Our business model just kind of fell into place over time. We continue to work on it. In our discussion in the last hour, somebody had asked about confidence and how it we talked about how you have confidence to be able to launch some sort of business or to be able to move forward and launch a business model. The way I looked at it was this, in very simple terms, and I'll kind of end on this, and then we'll ask some questions. I found that I had a choice. I could either trust somebody else to be able to cut my paycheck and care for my wife and kids and family and dreams and desires and tell me when to go on vacation, when not to go on vacation, when to serve a mission, when not to serve a mission, when I could do church stuff, when I couldn't, or I could decide to do that myself. And so for me, that's essentially what the decision came down to, is I felt that for me, in my own personal life, I felt more comfortable, and I had the confidence enough to say, you know what, I can figure it out. I set some goals in place and decided that I was going to figure it out. And I just didn't feel comfortable leaving my life to somebody else and leaving it to chance. But I think those are things that, those are personal decisions. I think business isn't for everyone. Some people love it and eat it up. They love the chaos of it. Just like some people like being mothers to toddlers. They think it's great chasing them around and screaming and everything else. And I personally couldn't do that, even though I've had a lot of toddlers running around. But it's just for, but business it's different for every individual and every person. Okay. Now, ask me a question ask me something good that we can get on tape. It'll be on YouTube.
I have a quick question. What kind of government regulations came out that affected your business?
For us, actually, the 9/11 became a positive spin because all of a sudden all these organizations were coming in and saying, you now can't just walk into a Fortune 500 company anymore and just walk around the building and have free reign. So you saw a lot of proximity locks, a lot of people using ID cards, ID businesses. Some of those were government regulated. Department of Defense forced everyone to step it up another notch, and that helped our business a little bit.
I hear about a lot of entrepreneurs that fail. Has that happened to you?
You know, it's interesting. I was scared to do my second business venture because the first one did well, and I hear a lot of them do well on the first one, and then they fail on the second one, and they really learn. And I was scared to death of that for a while. I believe that a lot of times we have to look at have to have the big picture, and I can't say, I wish I could say that I've actually fallen on my face and lost millions of dollars somewhere. I feel like I'm just too conservative. Like I'm not really a risk taker. Some people would think that I am, but I don't consider myself a risk taker. For me, it just comes down to numbers, and it comes down to processes and if it makes sense. If I were to ask many of you in here, how about you give me $5,000, and in a couple of years I'll give you $100,000. If you could see the future and you could have control over it, you would say, well, yeah, that's a no-brainer. That's the way my brain works. In other words, I haven't gone too far. I've implemented a certain number of conservative principles. We pay cash for all of our equipment. We try and finance as little as we can. We stay cash positive. We try to stay out of debt as an organization and as a business. And that's really not the way the world goes with it. The world says, no, leverage yourself to the hilt. But everyone that was leveraged 6 months ago is out of business right now because they didn't have the cash to survive. So that's helped us prevent it. Go ahead.
What's your core competencies that you beat all the competitors? You have like 100%.
Well, he's asking what our core competencies are. One of the models that we emphasize is that we can take a process that would normally take 5 to 7 days elsewhere with a competitor, and we can do it within a day. And so our core competency comes down to Six Sigma implementation. It comes down to our speed. I can call it a bunch of different things, but basically you can order from our competitor and they can produce something for you in 7 days, or you can order from us and for the same price we'll do it for you in 2 days. And our warehouse is chaotic and it's a madhouse, and we stress a lot. We have a high stress industry, but we find that there are a lot of employees that actually like that environment. They like the challenge of waking up in the morning and Nike says, we just got hosed on a product from overseas. It's not coming in on time. We don't know what's happening with it, or it's stuck in customs, or something happened to it. Can you guys save us? And that's where we bring our heads together and say, sure, we'll figure out a way to get you your products. I would say that's our core competency. In the back?
When you decided to go into like the ID side of it and try to change it, like when you initially did it, did you go out and immediately start buying a bunch of machines and make it yourself, or did you kind of like go to someone else?
No, that's a great question, and this shows my conservative side. Every process that we have built so far, we have begun the process by brokering it. In other words, we haven't really invented anything new. We have just worked with current manufacturers. And so we found people that were already producing lanyards. They weren't as popular. And they were saying, well, we can produce lanyards that takes 9 or 10 days. We actually approached them and said, can we order from you? And we started building that base in that way. Then we started teaching them a little bit on how to be a little bit faster. We have a facility overseas in China, and I fly over there quite often to teach these same principles to them because we realized that we were brokering all of these deals, but through the brokering, people can only do it in a certain amount of time. At some point, we started acquiring those businesses, or we started acquiring the machinery to compete with them. So I started out, like if I want to sell shoes, I obviously wouldn't buy the machinery to start the shoes. I would find a shoe manufacturer. I would send them my designs. They would manufacture the shoes for me. And as time goes on, and I realize that we're building the market for the shoes, then it becomes fiscally sound for us to actually purchase the equipment and start. So that's a good question. We actually have 4 or 5 product lines that we're still in the process of. We're brokering, but ultimately we will bring those in-house as well. There's another question in the back.
Yeah, was the cash problem what you ran into 6 months ago that figured all your competitors out, or was there a different threat that you planned on? I basically want to know what the threat you planned on.
No, that's a good question. He asked about the threat. What happened was people were getting too much money in an easy fashion. And so what had happened was a lot of our competitors were actually upgrading their machinery in 04, 05, 06. And, or at least we were upgrading our machinery, and then they started to follow suit a little bit. Well, one of the differences is because we paid cash for ours, because we didn't want to be beholden to the banks or have any issues, we wanted to be able to free that up. A lot of our competitors couldn't make their payments. In other words, when business dropped just 20% or 15% for them, they couldn't make the payments. And at that point, I think that's when a lot of them went out. And it was a good thing for us. This is a positive of the economy the way it is, because we're able to go in and actually grab some of that equipment at less than cost, and we're able to expand our market share right now. So that's what we're working on right now, is expanding our market share and expanding our client base.
Talk a little bit about producers and suppliers and things in China. When you initially got involved with your friend, did he already have those relationships set up? Or
He didn't. For me, it was kind of a shot in the dark. I had talked to a lot of people that had done business overseas, and they were about half and half. And where half of the people would say, "I had a great experience. I ordered, 40,000 water bottle holders, and they showed up 9 weeks later, and it was great, and it was a wonderful experience." And other people would say, "Well, I wired money over to China. I haven't seen him since. I have no idea how to contact him. I have no idea what to do, and I'm certainly not going to fly over there." What I did is I started figuring out all the people that had gotten in trouble by doing that, people that had lost money, and I talked to them to figure out, why is it that you lost money, at what point. And then when we finally started doing business in China, my first deal, I had all the processes in place, the contracts, everything all set up, so that I knew that they would give a little, I would give a little, and we'd sort of meet halfway. And it took us about probably 4 months or 5 months to start establishing relationships over there. And then in 2005, we went over and started building our own facility, just because it made more sense for us. But no, the relationships weren't there. That was me surfing the web at 2 o'clock in the morning overseas and trying to contact people, hoping that somebody would speak English, grabbing buddies that served in Taiwan and asking them to do some translation, and finding out that lanyard doesn't really have a word in Chinese, and everything else. But yeah, that's a good question. All the relationships are relationships that I had to personally start up. And again, it's not that hard. If you want to build something in China, you start Googling, start playing around, and you start contacting the companies.
So your management team that's located in China, are they Chinese? You hire people from here and send them over?
No, they're Chinese.
And so how did you interview them? Did you go over there and interview them yourself, or did you hire people to interview?
We've got a guy that's over there, one guy that we worked with who was working for a factory. We got him on board over there, and then he takes care of all of our day-to-day operations. And so we just go over. It's really a good relationship. We talked in our last discussion about how I like to just tell people this is what I expect, and as long as people are hitting the marks, I really don't care too much about how things happen, or we don't really have too much involvement. We do have daily reporting and daily communication back and forth, but that's all done through technology. So on their side it's in Mandarin, and on our side it's in English, but we're able to click boxes that mean the same thing. And so we've set up our proprietary software that we have built now works. So when they finish an order, that's coming over for raw goods, or if it's direct shipping to a client, they can put all the information in that we need that feeds our system. So when the account executive gets a phone call tomorrow morning, they know exactly what's happening with the order. And most of our account executives don't know if it's coming from the China facility or if it's shipping from another location throughout the U.S. or if we're manufacturing it here in Springville. 2 minutes.
How did you market your company when you first got it going? Just online? Searches, or?
Yeah, it was all natural, organic listings and pay-per-click. That's how we started it. And we just jumped in. And in fact, that's where my partner and I disagreed with nametags.com, because he said, why would anybody pay 20 cents to actually click on a website that that they could just find in the search listings? But I kind of went off of a hunch and thought, wait a minute, if we don't get into this right now, we're going to be really far behind. But we spend a large amount of budget. I mean, we give Google over $100,000 a month right now to just do our search listings. But we didn't obviously start out doing that. You just build up. You'd be amazed. You drop $400 or $500. There's a reason why Google is Google. You drop a few $100 on them, and you'll start getting hits on your website. Yep.
You mentioned that you set up 10 or 12 other websites to kind of feed your nametags.com. What was the reason? Were they different products, or were they?
Yeah, there were a couple of different product lines. We had set up at some point. We essentially are like 10 or 12 different shops in one. So we do embroidery, we do screen printing, we do pad printing, we make badge holders, we do lanyards, we do ID tags, we do engraved tags, we do key rings, we do SEO services, we do logo design, we do a little bit of small business help, etc. So we have all these different things that we did, and we had so many different domains that we started gearing them towards different people. So, for example, we have a domain that just targets the hotel industry. So a hotel company will get on there. All of our back end is the same, but all of the shells on the front end are different. So we'll go to a hotel convention, we'll talk to hotel owners and managers, and we'll say, these are all the products that you want to use in your hotel. Now, most hotels aren't going to use, there are certain products that they may not use. They're not going to use banners, let's say, for example, or they won't use car wraps. So for us, we just took a hotel site and said, this is just for hotels. We do that for the real estate business. We do that for the restaurant industry. We do that for all of these different industries. Right now, I think we have 50, 52, or 54 active domains. And usually, with our search engine stuff, we try and keep those 5 or 6 out of the top 10. So if you search for a particular keyword, you'll go to a shell website that maybe doesn't look like us, but ultimately it'll feed back to us, and we'll get the order for it. You guys are easy. Well, thanks. Thanks for having me.